Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. I first want to say thanks to Adam for allowing me to jump on this channel and share some music production tips while recreating the beat for Ariana Grande's Break Up With Your Girlfriend on Board. So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, something to keep in mind, the goal of this video is not necessarily to find the same exact patch or sound that the producers used when creating this song, but more so to focus in on the mindset and developing ear training so that when you hear sounds that you like, you more or less know how to navigate how to recreate those sounds. And I think it's just more beneficial and helpful for you to know what steps to take and how to recreate the sound rather than just pointing you straight to that sound itself. So I'm going to be using Ableton Live 10 in recreating this beat. And we're going to start by focusing our attention on the drums. So here I have a MIDI track with a drum rack instrument loaded on this track, which is an instrument that allows you to load multiple sounds and have them triggered. And so I'm simply going to double click this, and this is going to show us the drum pattern. The drum pattern is pretty straightforward, so let's just take a listen to it. But we're going to do a couple things and add little nuances and some details that'll really bring some life to the drums. So the first thing I want to point out is the hi-hat roll that we have here. We had this 30-second note hi-hat, and what I've done was I've taken this hi-hat, I've duplicated it to another cell, and I've pitched it up. But we're going to do some automation to continue the pitching up, and that gives it that nice cool effect that we hear in the reference. So let me walk you through that process. So these two hi-hats are the same. So what I've done is I've grabbed this hi-hat and holding the Option button on my keyboard, I just clicked and dragged, and that'll duplicate that same sound. And then what I've done is on the second hi-hat, I made sure to just transpose it. So I'm up 6 semitones here. So this hi-hat, normal, and this is pitched up by 6 semitones. We're going to go ahead and actually transpose it a little bit more. So I'm going to right click on the transpose knob here, and we're simply going to hit show automation. And this is going to focus in my automation on that specific parameter, the transpose knob. So just highlight that section, and with holding shift, we're just going to increase this. So I'm going to go plus 12 semitones, and we'll just double click the first notch there so that it just goes back down and it does this nice gradual build up 12 semitones. Let's check this out. So we got that nice little, right, that little cool cricket sound with the hi-hats. So let's just copy this over, Command C, paste it right here. And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy that whole section and just duplicate it by hitting Command D. Cool. I'm going to leave my automation or envelope mode, go back to the MIDI note pattern, and we're going to accent certain hits in this pattern. So what I'm going to do is select the whole snare just by pressing that key, and you can see the dotted lines just highlight those notes. While they're all highlighted, I'm just going to grab one, hold the Option key, and move that down. And we're going to just layer that with a rim knock. And then these two notes here, let's accent those by adding the finger snaps that we hear. So same process, going to click the snare, and that's going to highlight the whole roll, all the snares that we've inserted in this pattern. I'm going to hit Option and drag that up to the finger snaps, which is called sample 8. And now we're just going to eliminate the first snap. And then take that last snap out. So it just accents these two hits here. So we'll take this snap out again and take this one out here as well. Now, the sounds that I'm using are all from a sample pack that I've put together, which you can download absolutely free. They're yours for free. They're royalty free, and it can be used in any DAW that you're currently using. Just click the link below in the description box to download this sample pack, and it's yours absolutely free. And so right after the pattern has been created, I'm using a plugin, an audio plugin from Ableton Live called the Drum Bus. And this is just going across all the different drum sounds on the drum rack. So I'll bypass it. and then we're going to inject some steroids. And what the Drum Bus plugin is doing, it's adding some saturation. So we're going to do some drive here. We're adding some overdrive on the mids, and then we're adding a little bit of damping. So we're actually kind of somewhat filtering out the high end with the 15 kilohertz. Anything above that's going to be filtered out. We're accenting the transients, so the initial attack of all the sounds are just standing out a little bit. And we're adding some compression. And the trim here regulates how much input is being driven into this plugin. So it's kind of the saturator, compressor, transient designer all meshed into one. So it's a really helpful tool just to kind of hit the ground running, especially when programming your drums. All right, so let's head over to the 808 bass line. So let's go ahead and create the 808 pattern. So we have our 2-bar pattern. I'm just going to go ahead and select all the notes that I've recorded by using Command A, and then I'm going to hit Command U to quantize them just a little bit and nudge them over to the nearest 16th note. And then I'm going to walk you through the 808 sample itself and how I'm shaping the actual character and tone of it. So this is an instrument that I've created, which you can have access to and download for free. It's included in the sample pack that I mentioned earlier. But this is just an 808 sample loaded into an Ableton Live Simpler. And then I go ahead and move over to an amp simulator. And this is essential in getting some really nice, juicy bottom end and beef overall to any of your 808 samples because it's adding a lot of the harmonics to the 808. So let's just, I've got it set to the heavy mode here on this amp, but you can use any amp simulator or any overdrive or fuzz distortion plugin that you might have in your DAW to get the same vibe. And then I'm doing some slight compression just so that any notes that might resonate more or jump out in volume a little bit more, the compressor will just keep it controlled and give me a nice, consistent, dynamic performance. And then I'm using an EQ to really shave away all the high end that I'm getting from the amp simulator. And you can just trim it back to taste. And then I'm using another compressor, but this is going to be side chaining. And so what I'm doing is I'm allowing the bass to duck out of the way every time a specific sound is heard. In this case, I'm using the kick drum to side chain the 808 bass. So I just, to access the side chain in an Ableton Live's compressor, click the little side menu here, enable the side chain, and then determine where the audio is coming from. So in this case, it's coming from the drum rack. And what specific audio from the drum rack, it's going to be the kick, and I usually have it at pre-effects. And now, every time the kick is being played or heard, the 808 will duck out of the way and then come right back once the kick is not playing anymore. And this is going to add some nice punch and space for both the 808 and the kick to live together. So let's just take a listen to that. All right, so let's focus on the main riff that we hear throughout the whole song. And so when I try to visualize that sound, it feels to me like a mysterious underwater bell. So it's going to be a little bit dark and dull. So I'm not going to gravitate towards something as bright, maybe say like a sawtooth or a square wave. Might lean towards a sine or a triangle wave. So for this, I'm going to use the wavetable. Or you can follow along using any 2-oscillator synth that you might have in your DAW. So I'm going to click the wavetable, drag and drop that on there. And as I mentioned, the sine wave will give us that nice dull tone. Anything brighter, like the sawtooth, will make it a little sharp and a little bit too bright. So let's leave it at the sine wave. And let's go ahead and take a look at the pattern. Okay, now we're just going to shape this a little bit so that we can get as close as possible. So I'm going to leave the sine wave there. That's the right waveform we're going to use. And we're going to just use the filter frequency on the wavetable to just take away any of that high end. But more importantly, we're going to resonate a specific frequency here. And then making sure that our amp envelope is what we're focusing on now. I'm going to bring out the release a little bit so that when the note stops playing, it actually continues to be heard just for a little bit. And that's the release. And then I'm going to head over here to the matrix section of the wavetable. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to route the LFO to detune the pitch of the sine wave just slightly. So it's adding some modulation, some movement. So just going to click the detune of oscillator 1. You see oscillator 1 pitch there. And I'm going to send a little bit of that to LFO 1. Yeah, sounds like the little ghost from Pac-Man. But let's go to the mod sources, LFO 1, and we're going to adjust the amount and the timing of how it's being modulated. So let's increase the rate a little bit, and then raise the attack more, not the attack, but we're going to raise the timing, or what this is normally set to as delay. So in Ableton Live you have the A here, but it symbolizes the delay of the LFO. How long does it take for the LFO to actually start working? And that's what gives it that creepy, mysterious vibe, is that modulation at the very end of each note. So I've got the rate up, and I'm just kind of getting it to taste at 6.54, about 11% of the amount. But the real key here is that we're delaying the LFO by 4.27 seconds. So as you can see here visually, it's a little bit straight, but then it starts to wobble a little bit towards the end, and that's what we're looking for. And then I'm going to go and set the unison. This is a global detune. I'm going to set it to classic. Cool. And now let's add a reverb directly on top of that sound. So click the reverb and drag that and insert that right onto the waveform. So let's just dial the dry and wet back and start with that. So I'm going to bring the decay time down because I don't want the reverb to play on for too long after the notes have being ran through it. So let's just drop the decay time. And see what that sounds like with the rest of the track. Now the main riff also has this other layer that's just playing the same notes as the 808 bass line. So it's actually doubling up as the bass line. So what I'm gonna do is use another wavetable, just click and drag that into here. And it's a little brighter in tone. So we're gonna stay away from the sine wave and maybe travel up to a triangle and see what that gets us. And I'm going to copy the pattern from the 808, just holding Option and dragging that over. And we are just going to, I'm going to deactivate that note by hitting 0 so it won't play, and just shorten the notes. We'll just grab this one here. And I'm going to shorten the length of the loop. So let's just play that. So I'll grab these two notes and just shorten them a little bit more. And then let's go ahead and shape the tone a little bit. So I'll bring the resonance up and just filter this out a little bit. And I'm going to set this over to monophonic. And that's so that any tones or any of the notes don't overlap each other. And we're going to set the unison to noise. So it adds a little bit of white noise on top of that. And extend the release out just a little bit. And now we're going to open up our second oscillator and move that over to a triangle as well. But this is going to be an octave higher. So let's hit 12 semitones up and let's just balance the volume between the two. Cool. Now let's go ahead and blend that in with the main riff. All right, so let's wrap this up by creating the synths that we hear in the turnaround section right before the chorus. And so for this, I'm going to use a wavetable again, but instead of dealing with the sine or the triangle, which has more of a mellow dull tone, we're going to go ahead and focus using a sawtooth, which is a lot more brighter. So we're going to go grab the wavetable, drag and drop it, and let's go ahead and go from sine wave over to a sawtooth. So let's just check out the chords and see what we have. As you can see, it's actually as really close just by even choosing the right waveform. And so that's why it's really important to kind of get familiar with the texture and the tonality of these different waveforms, because they're really the starting points for creating a lot of the sounds that you're trying to recreate. So initially, when hearing the sound on the reference, it sounds very thin and almost like this old-time radio feel. So I know I'm going to probably take out some of the low end here. So I'm going to use 2 filters for this, and we're going to use one here to just creep away some of that low end, and maybe around 200 or so. And I'm going to use the other filter, the first one here, to take away some of the really brittle high end and make it sound a little warmer. But we're going to maybe just brighten that up a little bit. And let's go ahead and add some subharmonics here. So I'm going to actually use the sub, which is just another oscillator, just an octave lower. And let's go and see what that sounds like. Maybe lower the gain a little bit. That's cool. And then we'll just shape this a little bit, just have a little bit of the release. And let's go ahead and use the unison here. We'll put the noise once again and just set it at default. We'll leave it at 30. Great. Now what I'll do is I'll layer that first oscillator with the second oscillator. And this is just going to stay at a sine wave. And what we're going to do is just balance out the volume until we just find a really good sweet spot for the two of them. Cool. So, and then what happens to the beat during that part is it just actually gets filtered out. So I can go to my audio effects, we can put a filter directly onto the drums, and we'll go ahead and just filter that out. So if I just solo the drums and this section here, well, I hope this video has been helpful for you, and I want to once again say thanks to Adam from iMusicMogul for allowing me to stop on by this channel and share these music production tips with you. I also have a gift for you for watching this video. I want to send you a sample pack filled with construction kits, loops, one-shots, transition effects, and some of the sounds that we heard in this video. You can simply just click the link below and download this sample pack. It's absolutely yours free. It's 100% royalty free, so you can use them in your projects and share your music with the rest of the world. And it works in any DAW. Just simply drag and drop the sounds into your DAW and hit the ground running. Once again, you can click the link below or visit www.beatacademy.com/pack. Thanks and take care.